All right, let's just do a short practical application or summary. I'm going to try and not repeat everything that we've done the past few recordings. It's a good summary or application just to bring it more to life and add some interesting materials. Okay. Number one, whenever you're dealing with an insect and do you need to check it and can you eat it, it's critical to establish if the item that we're talking about, when it's in your house and you will need to deal with it, right? It doesn't matter what it is in the field. Status can change. It matters when it's in your house. Do we consider it muchsak b'tolayim, or do we consider it miut hamatzui, or a miut she'eno matzui? So really, really important for checking and for b'diavad, can you eat it or not? Now, according to most Poskim, that if it's a miut hamatzui, then it could be batel. It is batel b'shishim, even if it's a shalim on a deraisa level. But midarabanan, oh, you know what? This is more. Let me save that point for later. That's okay. Never mind. Sorry. Scratch that one idea. Now, the whole idea of I'll point out something important that the Igros Moshe brings down. The Aruch Shulchan writes something similar, and many write something similar. He writes, "Lor nira lemaisa lehedya leinayim eno aser." If you cannot see it, it's not aser, and it's. He goes on to a whole thing saying it's. He writes, "Lo nitna Torah lamalachei Kashrus." That the Torah is, right, it's given to man. It has to be reasonable and practical for us to be able to eat and be able to check. And anything that's you can't see is not going to be aser. And it's aser lahotzi laaz. They both write. Aruch Shulchan Igros Moshe. It's aser to write to motzi laaz on all the previous generations. In other words, our standards nowadays has to be similar to the standards that were always in Klal Yisrael. Just because nowadays we have magnification, that doesn't change anything. And basically all the poskim, right? Even the most machmer opinions, right? You do not, if you cannot see it to the naked eye, then it's 100% mutter. You're allowed to eat, breathe, and drink. Anything you can't see, it's not a problem. Even if it's visible with magnification, that has zero bearing on the halacha. Now, he writes something that's really small, but even if you know here, okay, something that's really small. So this is in Igros Moshe and some few other places. If you have an insect that's really tiny, and then it gets mixed in, so what happens? So if it's so we know a filu be'elef la batil. If you have a complete creature, creepy crawler, an insect, if it's complete, we know it's not batal. That's the halacha. However, it's important to point out that there is an opinion out there that says it is batal be'elef. Okay, so in other words, when you have all like a list of sfekas or a list of situations to put together, if you're going to have something really, in other words, he writes in his tshuva. You can read it yourself. Yeah, where's the sources? I'll find it eventually. Igros Moshe bet and Chelik bet Kuf Mem Vav. And Chelik Dalid Seif, Siman Bet. That's where he discusses this. And he points out that if it's something that's really small that you can't find, in general it's going to be fine. Number one, the only problem is we're saying maybe a birya be'elef is la batel, right? So he says, number one, there's an opinion that says it is batel. Number two, there's an opinion that says a birya is only aser by itself, and we say it's lat batel, we say it's not batel, a birya, only if it was by itself at some point. If it was wandering, or you saw it wandering around, and then it jumps in, and now it gets mixed up. But if it was always there, and that's how it always was, then we don't say it's not batel, it is batel b'shishim. There's another opinion that says it's mutter because Chazal were never gozer a birya if it's something that's disgusting. The only time it's not batel, we say it's not batel filu be'elef, we don't rely on batel b'shishim, is only if it's something that's considered edible. Something that's considered disgusting, we don't apply that to. Now, I'm just pointing, most of what I'm saying, by itself is not the halacha. But when you put, these are major Rishonim and Achronim, and when you put them all together, it makes a big difference to be meko. Also, he points out, or some point out, he doesn't say everything, another sneif is when you chew it. Some poskim write that when you chew it, it's no longer going to be, if it breaks up when you chew, just in one little leg or something for it to fall apart, it's no longer a shalim. Once you chew it, it is batal b'shishim. It doesn't go by when you put it in your mouth. Some things do go by when you put it in your mouth. Let's say volume of foods. That goes by when you put it in your mouth to know if it's a kibetza, kazayit, v'chulei. But the air and all that density. But when it comes to the isser of tolaim, it's all dependent upon the blia when you swallow it. So therefore, as long as you chew it beforehand, then maybe it is batal b'shishim. Again, these are all things that most poskim are not relying upon lechatchila, but it's a part of a whole list. Another good source for all these different sveikas, there's lots of sources, but one of the good ones is in Minchas Asher, Chelak Aleph. He has like 5 tshuvas, one after another, going through different points. What's it called? So there's another opinion. It says similar to what we said before. If it grows part with the tree, then it is batal b'shishim. It's only when it attaches itself to the fruit and the leaves later on, then it's considered something separate, similar to what we said before. But, okay, that's another thing is when it's cooked. Anytime something gets cooked, the principle is there's a suffix, it's nimuach. It gets dissolved, again, even partially dissolved, and then it's no longer has a din of a shalim, and then it could be batal b'shishim. The Minchas Asher, Chazanish, the Chacham Asadam, they all point out that let's say you're going to take something and it's cooked, then and it might have a bug in it. Let's say you cook a green yerakot, and now you want to eat it, but it might have bugs in there. So then there's reasons that it could be mutter. Well, it depends. Well, let me just say it like this: if it's something that is muchzak to have insects, so the general rule is it's asr and nothing you can do about it. If it's only a mute, unless you can check it afterwards. If you can't check it, most poskim seem to say it's asr. If it's something that's only asr because it's mute hamatzui, right? Only up to 50%. So then, once it's cooked, you have, right, but yevid, and if you can remove it, you still have to remove it. If you can't remove it, then b'di'evid, the poskim say, at least if it's miyut hamatzui and not muchzak, then it is mutter b'di'evid. Chazanish writes that, and like I said, most of the poskim say this, and because number one, it's batal b'shishim. Number two, it's a miyut she'eino hamatzui, so we say maybe there was never a tulat. Then maybe it was nimuach. Maybe you chewed on it. Okay, so that's, and the Chachmas Adam adds that also, similar to the case we just had, in the end of Yud Zayin, if you're going to bake or roast an orange, was his case, or an apple, whatever it is, or it could be broccoli on the outside, anything that's on the surface gets dried up. He says it's the same thing as being, first of all, it might get burnt. Second of all, he says even though the fruit is not, the vegetable is not burnt, but the insect will get either burnt or completely dried up. So since we hold after, again, it's a machlokas, but we paskin lahalacha, after 12 months, it's 100% mutter. So too, anything that gets burnt is 100% mutter as well. And so that's, so you have another, and it's batal b'shishim, and you don't want to eat it. It's not achshave. So that's if it's on the outside and it's roasted, or if you cook it and it's all in water, and that's nimuach. So it helps either way. The question mark that's left is if it's baked inside bread, because then it doesn't necessarily get burnt and dried out. That's where we're left with the question. And there's no issues of mevatel isser lechatchila because it's there. You don't want it to be there. You're not putting it there in order to be mevatel it. So that's that. A couple interesting questions. Let's say you see a black dot on a fruit and you don't know what it is. So Rabbi Pessin and Shem Rav Asher Weiss said, if you don't know what it is, you don't have to worry about it. It's just a dot and it's too small to see. So then you don't have to worry that maybe it's an insect and you're allowed to eat it. However, if you see it moving, then obviously they hold it's aser. And if you show it to an expert who says, I know that dot, and those dots are insects. So then they also say you have to be, we're going to get to that in a moment, just a couple lines on that. But anyways, bottom line is they hold if you can see it you don't need a microscope. It's visible to the naked eye, but you can't recognize it. So then and you think that maybe it's a piece of dirt. Oh, it died. Okay. So that's when it becomes, so that's okay. So if it's, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to pull out your magnifying glass and check it. I mean, and that's pretty clear from the Aruch Shulchan and the Igros Moshe as well. Okay, so that's that case. What a person showed a strawberry to Rav Karelitz and Rav Chaim Kanievsky, and he said, "Look, we don't see any bugs on it. Can you eat it?" And they said, "Yes. You Poskim, you're allowed to eat strawberries as long as you just look at it." Now, you probably had to cut off the tops. I'm not sure. But as long as you cut off the tops and you look at it and you can't find anything, then that is fine. Or, right, yes, Rav Karelitz, Kanievsky, and Rav Asher Weiss on that, so that's okay. Let's see. This we said already. Now, what about, what if something is so tiny that you can see a dot to the naked eye? And again, most poskim say you go by a normal person who looks at a normal distance, but you see the dot, but you can't recognize it. You don't see legs, you don't see anything. It's just a dot, right? They could be small like that. So then, what's the halacha? So the Chazon Ish writes that's aser, that's a sheretz, and I believe I saw also quoted by Rav Elyashiv that he also holds based on the Chazon Ish it's aser. Vaya, who in his sefer he points out it's a little mashma like that. If you look at the Ramah who quotes the Rashba, we had a case in the middle of Pei Dalet, and Rashi and Eruvin and Daf Koach, Amud Aleph, or Dibra Maschil Tzora, where he talks about you see it moving. So in those cases, anyway, so based on that, the only only one I've seen say posek who say beferush it's aser is the Chazon Ish, and then I saw it quoted in the name of Rav Elyashiv.
So you're talking about any black dot, or you're saying a black dot that people know could be a cloud?
Any black, okay. A black dot, so a black dot, okay. First listen, and then we'll apply what we said before. A black dot, that you see the dot, but you can't recognize it, and there's no way to make it out that it's an insect unless you have a magnification. So you don't have to use magnification, and what's the halacha on that? On that case, the Shevet HaLevi, in Zayin Kuf Chaf Bet, writes, Mikar Din Mutter. It's not a sheretz that the Torah was oser. Yalkut Yosef, Mikar Din and Hilchos Purim, says it's mutter. Rav Sternbach also says mutter. They don't say Safek Daraisa L'chumra. You don't have to say that. Maybe you should, but you don't have to, according to these poskim. Rabbi Weiner, Rabbi David, for example, they think Mikar Din, it's mutter. Rav Shlomo Zalman is quoted in Shemir Shabbos Kil Chasa, in the newer editions at least, and he writes that it's mutter. However, he's also quoted in the Shemir Shabbos Kil Chasa that Rav Shlomo Zalman afterwards was choshesh that maybe he was choshesh for the Chazon Ish. So on what level he went back on himself, I'm not sure. Now, Rav Asher Weiss in his tshuva says it's a suffix. He's machriya like this way. It's a suffix on an Isser Deraisa, and one should be machmer. But it does make a difference on when you have sveikus involved. Okay. But I do believe, though, according Kuli Alma, if you see this dot moving around, everybody will agree that it's aser. Okay. Um, right. And kimat everybody, if not everyone, holds. You do not have to pull out your magnifying glass to check, that we said. Um, but what I did say also, and doesn't matter, what I'm going to repeat is what Rav Pessin said, B'Shem of Asher Weiss, if you know that it's a bug because you see it moving, or an expert tells you it's a bug, then you can't eat it. Again, that might just be a suffix deraisa l'chumra. But okay, so to clarify that. Now, what about broccoli? Interesting case. What do you do with broccoli? So in general, with everything, I'm just going to say follow the general. Again, you need to know what status it has. Follow the general recommended how to get rid of them. And then it depends. Again, if it's a muhsak, it's a bigger problem. If it's miyat hamatzoi, it's much less of a problem. And as long as you cook it or roast it, and you did your best with anything that's a miyut hamatzoi, it's probably going to be no problem, kosher, your house or your friend's house, as long as the minimum is done. For muhsak, it's more complicated, different opinions. Just one last thing to talk about the water. New York City, famous. So what are the main issues? So the source of the water. Now we already learned that the source of the water doesn't help. If you drink from a pond of stagnant water, it's okay. But this water is it's flowing from where it's coming in the pipes, and now you're putting it into your glass. So kimat everyone says that if there's bugs in the water that you can actually identify, it's 100% aser. And they are big enough, from what I was told, metzias-wise, but you don't always see them. So it depends which borough you live in, what building you live in, which neighborhood you live in. For some people, it'll be miyut hamatzoi, or eina matzoi, or muchsak. So it's important to figure out. And then what about if it's bittul or not? So it depends. If it's cooking, it's probably going to be okay. Rav Asher writes in Parsha Shmini in his Minchas Asher, he writes, again, there are different opinions out there, but his basic, he's like, well, I don't really want to paskin for chutz laaretz. But anyways, he was asked, he basically writes that if it's cooked or you cannot see it, then it's okay. But better to filter it, and you do need to filter it if you do see it and you want to drink it. Many of the Poskim write it's better to filter it Erev Shabbos. We're not going to rehash filtering, but separating the bugs. I think that is enough to basically understand the sugya well. And there you go. Important to note, when we said that if it's invisible because it's too small to see, then it's okay. But if it's big enough to the naked eye, but it's camouflage, you can't see it because of the color, or it looks like the other little tiny seeds, that doesn't make it mutter. Camouflage, it could still be aser. Okay, one last interesting story. Rav Pessin told me he was with Rav Asher Weiss. Rabbi Vaya calls up Rav Asher Weiss while he's there and tells him, I went to the Kinneret, to the lake, and I took a glass or a jar, I pulled out the water, and lo and behold, it's full of bugs. So Rabbi Vaya Poskim, the question was, am I mechuyev now, or should I publicize to the whole world that it's aser to swim in the Yam Kinneret? Because he felt it's almost a psik resha, you're going to swallow some of the water, and all the water has bugs. That's where Rabbi Vaya is coming from. Rav Asher Weiss responds, no, do not publicize it, and it's 100% mutter to swim in the water, because your kavana is not, your kavana is to swim. Your kavana is not to ingest, your kavana is not to drink, and not to ingest the bugs. So therefore, it's not even an issue, it's 100% mutter of mitasik, because you're not even having kavana to eat or drink, you're just trying to swim.
You didn't have kavanah